Welcome to the Wildcast podcast, coming to you from Wildcast Studios with your hosts Adam Lund and Jeremy Boucher.
Hello, welcome into Wildcast Studios for another Wildcast podcast, your unofficial voice of all things Moncton Wildcats, presented by Alpha's Appliance Solutions. Right now, they've got the Kitchen Suite Savings Event. Purchase any two qualifying Maytag or Whirlpool major kitchen appliances. Save $300 when you purchase three or more qualifying Maytag Whirlpool appliances. As always, fan listeners, I am your host, Adam Lund, and I am joined by a writer for Rocket Sports via the QMJ, or the Rocket Sports QMJ channel via the Hockey News, your favorite co-hoster, and probably one of the only guys happy that the Kansas City Chiefs are in the Super Bowl, Mr. Jeremy Boucher. How was your weekend?
I'd have to correct you off the hop there, Adam.
Oh, yeah?
It is known as Taylor Swift's boyfriend's team.
Taylor Swift's boyfriend's team. That is correct. Literally could not care less about this Super Bowl, and I think outside Kansas City and San Francisco, that's the prevailing theme.
Well, it's I'll still watch it. I think I'll, like most years, pay more attention to the halftime show.
All about Usher this year.
Yeah, What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I literally said when Detroit was winning. Last night we went to bed Sunday night at like 9:30, and the Lions were up at they were up 24-7 or 24-10, I think at that point. I'm like, she's like, I'm going to bed. I'm like, yeah, because I could care less about this game. Like, they beat Tampa. I don't want them to win. I don't care. And woke up Monday morning, they fucking won. I couldn't believe that San Francisco actually won. But when Detroit was winning, and I thought it was going to be Detroit, Kansas City, I looked at it, I was like, I think I'm going to book us a hotel room somewhere in Halifax. A nice romantic Valentine's Day early weekend getaway. We'll be driving back for the first half, pull into town just as Usher hits, and then be done with this stupid game. But then San Francisco won, so I might tune in. But I have zero give a shits in this Super Bowl except for the halftime show.
I'll watch it on the basis of I want to see a Mr. Irrelevant win a Super Bowl.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of the whole thing.
I mean, it'll be the second Mr. Irrelevant, but yeah, it'll be the first Mr. Irrelevant quarterback to win the Super Bowl.
And then, of course, I checked out some of the odds, some of the bets you can place.
Yeah.
There was one where
I gotta find
Travis Kelce proposed to Taylor Swift. There was that one's at. Where is it here? Proposal must be on field after the game. No is at minus 250, and the yes is at a plus 190. Then you have, the MVP mentioned Taylor Swift in his speech. No at negative 310, and yes at plus 230. So
I wonder what the over-under is on Taylor Swift shots at the Super Bowl.
Well, will she make it is the thing, because she's got a concert in Japan.
You did send me that. Yeah, I forgot about that.
And so what is it? It happens
the day before, so it's like a 25-hour flight.
If all goes well, she could arrive in Las Vegas. I think this is at 9 a.m. Sunday morning.
Something like that.
Yeah, so she'll be able to attend the game. So get the beers ready. Take a drink every time Taylor Swift is shown on TV.
Well, you are going to be absolutely smashed. Now, you watched the whole Hell's Kitchen.
I did.
I taped it on Stupid City TV, and City TV claimed, it was just an hour episode. We'll show you the finale next week. What?
Yeah.
So I tried everywhere to find Fox On Demand, and I went,
USA.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Which we're going to find out in about 2 weeks with the Super Bowl, how stupid our TV is. But so I have no idea who won. I know it's Jonathan and Ryan. I know they picked their teams. Without giving it away based on the teams, I think Jonathan's got the strongest team, and that's based on the fact that Ryan took Jason.
Yeah, and I'm not going to spoil it for you, but this was the first time where I thought Chef Ramsay would throw a curveball and have both doors open, and he just gives them both a head chef job.
Oh,
because it was way too close for me to even call. Usually when you watch the finale of Hell's Kitchen, based on how the dinner service went, you can tell who is going to win. This was a dead heat. I had no clue I had no clue whatsoever. And that's kind of, after that, I was like, the guy's got other restaurants, like you're the head chef at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, and you're the new head chef at, so-and-so restaurant in so-and-so town, right? I was like, that's something that could be a twist that nobody saw coming, and something that could easily happen.
For
but
22 straight years, that would have been something that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we know there is a winner.
There is a winner. I can confirm,
and it's not Sammy, which. Again, we're getting better at picking these shows because you picked Ryan and I picked Jonathan. But we got a guest to get to, so we got a jam-packed show. So don't forget, as always, you can follow us on the social medias: Twitter, Moncton Wildcast, Instagram, Wildcast Podcast, TikTok, Wildcast Podcast, and of course, like and subscribe on our YouTube. Don't forget to click the little bell because sometimes the podcast post game shows up there and you don't want to miss it. Having some success with this quick question from our fans. So we got another one coming in. This one is from Braden Elaine.
My name is Braden, and I'm wondering for next year, what'll be the situation for the 20-year-olds for the Cats?
So,
nice.
Good question. Looking ahead a little bit, and based on the way that they played last weekend, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Loshing's going to be there. Steinman's going to be there. Now, based off our trade deadline show, there's a certain player from a certain team with a certain green color that could be on that list of 20-year-olds. There's also Thomas Auger is a 20-year-old. So for me, when you look at that trade with the picks, and I said this to you when we were kind of talking about this, there's another player that's going to be 19 next year on that team that I hope is part of that. He's not a defenseman. He'll be a forward, so we acquire both of them somehow. That allows us to go get a 20-year-old defenseman, because when you look at this roster, they're going to lose Bhutan and they're going to lose Plandowski. That is two 20-year-old defensemen they're going to lose. Yeah, there's going to be guys moving up that'll be 19, but that is a lot of experience off the back end that you're going to lose in a quote-unquote all-in year. So for that, I would like to hopefully the forward that I'm thinking of, and he's a pretty good forward on that team, is acquired as part of that deal, and then that allows them to go get a 20-year-old defenseman, because I do like having a forward, a defenseman, and a goaltender as a 20-year-old. Yeah,
and obviously I'm pretty sure we all know which forward you're talking about here. But if we ended up getting those two forwards, do we even have enough left to go and get a 20-year-old defenseman?
Yeah,
you're essentially emptying the cupboards and probably risking a similar futures thing as we saw, 3 or 4 years ago.
That's the worry about the 19-year-old forward and the 19-year-old defenseman. That
I don't really want to go down that road again. I think we will get one forward from Halifax, which will, that will do that'll be Loshing, it'll be Steinman, and then like we said a couple shows ago, we just happened to release the guy who was wearing number 6 in Moncton. So it just kind of the pieces are
there.
They're falling into place. Yeah. It's but you know what? This is sports and trades. It's unpredictable. You never know what could happen. For all we know, Loshing is traded. It's not. I doubt it happens, but or Steinman gets a U Sports deal next year and goes and plays university hockey.
Wild card. Yeah.
And then you have Keegan Warren, who is a capable goalie, but then a situation like that with Steinman allows you to go and get a 20-year-old defenseman. Yeah. So I think there's so many. So many question marks right now.
And the key there that you said, if Steinman is the wild card and we lose him to U Sports, you said go get a 20-year-old defenseman. You didn't so go spend assets on a goaltender.
Right.
Like that's the key is if we lose him as a 20, don't go into the St. John mold where you're getting a goaltender at the draft, and if it doesn't work, you're getting a goaltender at the trade deadline. Yeah. I think that's a key that you said there.
Yeah, I think if that's the case, if Keegan Warren for knowing how bad of a year it is for goalies, I mean, you've got to think that, You hope he gets drafted. And if he does, something like that does happen, then you can say that your starting goaltender is an NHL drafted goalie.
Yeah.
You know, that's not something that we can say right now. And that's not something we've been able to say in Moncton for, you know, when was the last time we had an NHL drafted goalie as our starting goaltender?
Riopel?
Because
there hasn't been one since other than Rodrigue.
Yeah,
that we acquired, but that's not in house. But
that's right.
He was drafted with Drummondville.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like it's been a while since Moncton's been able to say that we have an NHL drafted goaltender as our starting goaltender. You know, that's developed here. That was drafted here, and that's, you know, there's like this could easily just be. There could be people listening to this part of the show and just think we're just talking about this to kill time, but I mean, at the same, there is that small chance, and again, very, very Moncton Wildcats of all things to happen. You know, we've already known we've lost Miles Mueller, who, you know, at the start of the season, I wouldn't have said could play in the league as a 20-year-old, but given how he's played, I would have obviously wanted him on my team as a 20-year-old.
100%.
And, you know, now we've lost him to the pros in Switzerland. And again, the most Moncton Wildcats thing to happen would be to lose Steinman to, you know, U Sports.
Yeah.
You know, so there's it's easily something that can happen. I'm sure that I think very small possibility, but there's always that worry.
Yeah, and if it's not U Sports, it's not moving on from him. I know that there's been some people in the old DMs that have wondered that, and the guy's earned the ability to play at the 20-year-old level, and what he's doing this season, zero worry about him at the 20-year-old level. With Warren, another year, maybe the splits come down to kind of a 60-40 split, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, I think that's got to be in the back of Rick and Richie's mind is the U Sports back in Ontario, which hopefully not. But it's an interesting conversation because you can't really figure it out because you don't really know what that trade with Halifax is, and until we kind of know that, which June 7th and 8th you will know at the draft, then it's kind of tough to talk about the 20-year-olds. But excellent question from Braden. We thank all the fans that are doing this so far. We'll reach out to another fan this next week and see if they've got a question for us. And we'll also have the honorable question of which song by Usher.
Yes.
The annual question. Which song by Usher will kick off the halftime show. Let's get to some news notes from around the cube.
News and notes from around the cube.
Shawinigan over the last week, on the weekend, retired number 50, Jason Pominville. I was really surprised for a team that has that kind of history, that the Cataract jersey that he was wearing when he played in there, they were not wearing that night. They were just wearing the S. Like that's a franchise that embraces their history and wears a lot of different jerseys. I was kind of surprised that they weren't wearing that Native American style jersey. The green and blue one, I think, is the one he played in.
I didn't even know they retired his number.
one of those numbers you don't see for defensemen in junior hockey, number 50, over the weekend. Again, as well, some tough news coming out of Baie-Comeau. Emile Chenard has been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. They released a statement.
It's all Francais?
No, in English,
thankfully.
Yeah, no. And if they didn't, I was going to have it in English for us, but
I could have read it.
Yeah. With greatness, sadness, we announced defenseman Emile Chenard is diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, a cancer of the lymphatic system. He wanted to keep playing. Obviously, the schedule isn't allowing him to play. He hopes to be back by the playoffs, which is in 8 weeks, 2 months or so.
If you look at Newcomb,
I don't remember. Yeah, I was going to say I don't remember what his time.
It was training camp.
He came back
just 4 months later.
Yeah, so he's got a shot to.
Yeah,
I mean, Baie-Comeau doesn't have any plans of being done first weekend of April, so depending how
unless they play the Wildcats.
And at that rate, we've dropped all the way to 8th, and it won't be that long. But again, I mean, our thoughts are with him, his family, on and off the ice. Bacomo, and obviously this is 2 players in 18 months or so. This is very, very upsetting for a kid like that, especially at this age, and hopefully that he's able to get back on the ice in the playoffs for themselves. We had the top prospects game at the Avenir Center on Wednesday. Team Red taking it 3-1 on the back of Emil's teammate, Raul Boyard, who was also named team player of the game for Team Red. Team White had Deja We're going to get into this a little bit more with Scott Wheeler of The Athletic, spoiler alert, later in the show. But just, I guess, your quick thoughts on the game Wednesday evening.
I mean, for me, seeing Iginla on the ice at the Avenir Center was super weird.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he was one of the best players on the ice. You know, he was out there. You can tell he's got his compete level is there. He's got a shot. He can skate. For me, I think it's if he's there when the Flames are picking in the first round, I think it's a no-doubter. I think it's too perfect. But you know, it's the Flames. They'll probably take an Oil King or something like that. But no, it's
his brother.
Oh,
the Oil King is his brother.
Yeah, no, I had a great time. You know, from being able to watch some of those players. Probably the last time we'll get to see players like that for I guess we didn't pay for our tickets, I was going to say, but anyways, next time you watch some of these players, they could very well be in the NHL and all that. So it's very fun events. You know, I go in there on Tuesday afternoon to pick up my my pass. It was seeing some of them on the ice practicing, and my first thought was, how are these guys top prospects? You know, like they're doing skating drills and they're knocking down the cones, and I'm like, what? How are you even on the radar right now? But that was
sadly
fun.
That wasn't the only time you said that too. You said that a couple times during the game.
Yeah, that's the fun part about a prospects game. It's nice to go to the rink and not give two shits about who wins and who loses. Just, you know, go and have a good time. And
pretty much.
And honestly, I was impressed. Like there's a lot of I know the CHL their representation of I guess the talent isn't there as what we're used to seeing. It's not a very good year for the CHL, but I think we were treated to a really good show.
Yeah, and it started from the minute we walked in the building. Catered food was unbelievable.
Oh man, killing with it.
Some chicken, rice, veggies,
freshly chucked oysters.
Yeah,
man.
The lady, I didn't catch her name, but she's from Owen Sound. She's like, yeah, I've gone back about 3-4 times, just taking 2 like shots, just taking them back. Jeremy had a few. He tried to get me to try them. I did not. But from that to honestly, like you walk in and we feel like we should belong as media, but I didn't until probably about halfway through the first period. I was like, yeah, we actually do belong here. But it was kind of cool to be up there and see a lot of the names we've grown up watching talk about these prospects. And then the game on the ice was kind of, I don't know if I was expecting more of an all-star style game, like a 6-5, 7-4 type game.
The goalie stole the show.
But the goalies, yeah, they did steal the show. I think it was Linderson from Mississauga.
Linderson, yep.
He was great in the first half. The Tri-City American goaltender shut her down. But it was a very cool event. It's too bad there's potential that it's not going to continue to happen, but I think what is going to come out of it will be just that much better because, you know, like you said, we didn't get Macklin Celebrini, and that's the top-rated prospect because he's at Boston University. Yeah, Boston University.
We didn't get him. We didn't get Levshunov. We didn't get Yzerman. We didn't get the other Russian Saliev or something like that. So we didn't get Caden Lindstrom because he was hurt.
Injured, yeah. Didn't get Justin Poirier for whatever reason.
Some reason.
Yeah. But no, it was cool to see, and it was a fun event. It had that 7:30 start. You still in on the 7:30 starts? I mean, that was a game on TSN, so there was a few more commercials than what a regular game would be. But
give me a 7:30 starts on Friday night, so I'm happy. I'm not going to do 7:30 starts every friggin' night.
No.
Like by the time 10 o'clock roll around.
Yeah. We didn't do any interviews. We wanted to, but of course it came at like the worst possible week with Mike having a cold, Jeremy picking up on a little bit of a cold. It's one thing to be around the Wildcats and stuff like that, but it's one thing to be around these prospects, and we just wanted to stay away until we felt a little bit better. But again, it was an awesome event, and it showed that we have a world-class facility that can host things that should be next year. Moving on. Some CHL news regarding the Euro draft. There is talk that they could lift the ban on Russians and Belarusians as we get and moving the prospects game to more of an NCAA CHL type game with both leagues representing both top players. I think for the Russians, the Belarusians, I think it's kind of time. Like, what are you looking at?
No, my phone is ringing.
Oh,
it's the first name Likely, last name Fraud.
Oh man, depending who that is, that would have been a wicked call to take live on the air.
I missed it.
Yeah, that would have been one of those take the call and then edit it out, and that's the B-roll for down the road. But Russians, Belarusians, I think they can come back into the CHL. I know that our guest had a tweet that a lot of them had to go USHL because they had no other avenue, and they want to be over here playing against the best, and I kind of think it's time.
I have to agree, and it is unfortunate because Lev Shunov that our guest I think has rated number 2.
Yep.
He was all in on the CHL until they took away until they banned Belarusians. So it was the league's loss that they made that decision, and regardless of which way you want to go about it, and whichever way your opinion goes when it comes to the ban, it's at the end of the day we lost out on players who wanted to be here, and I think there was another one. There was a Russian that's probably in his top 10 that wanted to play CHL as well, but just couldn't come over. So I think it's a good time, and because there's some talent coming out of those two countries that could easily be picked in the draft. So I think it's time to kind of get back to allowing them into the CHL.
Yeah, and once you allow them back in the CHL, hopefully the IHF allows them back into these tournaments, and we truly get the best on best. Now, I don't know if that will happen in Ottawa because the tournament is set, and the greatest country in the world, Kazakhstan, will represent. But hopefully this is
the number one exporter of potassium. Yeah,
it's nice. This is very nice. Hopefully this kind of sets that in motion, and we get the best on best. So our guest is delayed a little bit, so I guess we should probably talk about our team, eh?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Let's.
As unfortunate as that sounds right now.
Yeah. This is the segment you want to tune in for. Here we go.
Weekly Rewind.
Cut everybody.
I thought you were going to be like, I'm done, and just pour water on yourself. For those not watching on YouTube, A, you should be, and B, that will make sense if you watch on YouTube. But the Wildcats go 0-2 on the weekend, extending the losing streak now to 4 games, bringing the record to 26-12, 3-3 for still 58 points, which is good enough to hang on to third in the conference, just barely, and second in the Maritimes division, just barely. Friday, a team they lost to, I talked about being a sneaky, underrated team at the deadline, has gotten better. They showed they've gotten better. And let's be honest, you can't spot anybody a 3-goal lead in this league and expect to win. And it's been time after time. They're not starting on time, and they get behind. And they came close. They fought back. The Loshin goal at the end of the first, I remember saying, that's a big one if they want to get back in this thing. Mm-hmm. They did. An unfortunate goal cost them, as that one went in off Bhutan's stick. Just an errant play, a lucky play from Cape Breton, but you make your breaks, and they lost 4-3 to a team that is just kind of rolling. But again, you can't allow a team a 3-goal lead.
Oh, and that comes back to, like you said, starts. You can't. Yeah, it's the worst lead in hockey. Yes, they came back and made it 3-3 when they were down. The worst lead in hockey. But you can't let that happen. There was I've started to notice something that now that I didn't see in the first half. They can't take a hit. It's like they tighten up as soon as they feel contact coming, or if they sense a forecheck coming, it's like they tense up and it's just turnovers, goals, this and that. That didn't happen in the first half. Yes, there was turnovers, but they were able to take a hit. Like, what happened so that they could no longer take a hit? And it's almost like there's no communication on the ice either. There's no communication. There's no in-game adjustments. There's nothing. There's nothing right now.
That's the concerning part, is there's no in-game adjustments. Aside from, and I can't remember who said it on the boards that I was reading just before we got going, but aside from juggling lines here and there, and that was more on Sunday because of an injury, there's not an in-game adjustment from the Wildcats when they get down. Yeah, they make plays and they make things happen, and again, we're now 2-7 without Denway, as he wasn't in the Cape Breton game, when he's out of the lineup, I guess I should say. But it's one of those, they can't make adjustments.
There's no preparation. And like Craig Eagle's article said today on Twitter, they are giving up 30 shots a game consistently. I think he mentioned he had asked us up in the booth how many games, and we thought there was like 2, and I kind of started to count, and I got to 4 before I stopped because the Wi-Fi is not the best up there. But 8 games in 44, they've allowed under 30 shots, and I think he said 6 of them or 5 of them they were at 29. Well,
like that is a recipe, and it's unfortunate, and it's the same losing streak legitimately that they had last year at the exact same week. The schedule from last year, they lost on the 18th, then they beat Cape Breton on the 20th, then they lost on the 22nd, 28th, and 29th last year. Like the 4 out of 5 at this exact same week. It's just, I don't know if it's just playing in January in the middle of the year, it just kind of gets tough on them or what, but it's a little bit of a concern.
Yeah, I know for sure, and
or a lot of bit of a concern, whichever way you look at it.
Yeah, and Drew Bear, the Talon blog, he interviewed Coach Lacroix before this game, and Coach Lacroix said that they had a good week of practice, so they had some good meetings, and they were ready to go. You sure about that? You sure about that? There was no preparation for this game. There was nothing. I mean, yeah. And the thing that sucks is we had that opportunity late in the game to tie it up, and I think they've missed 2 or 3 wide open nets.
Yep.
And that sucks.
Yeah.
Those are shots that you need to go in, because it would have been nice to get at least a point, to out of this game to make it look like something.
Which they were getting success doing when they were losing to end the year, and in this stretch since the trade deadline, they were getting points when they were losing. They were getting to overtime. You move into Sunday against Sherbrooke, more of the same, just not ready to go.
This was actually worse than Cape Breton.
Yeah, not ready to go. First 2 minutes, Minscombe scores, and you had said, how do you let a guy that open? The first 30 seconds, if you go back and watch that game, in the first 30 seconds, he's standing there by himself again. Then the Wildcats kind of get back into it. Moran, Loshing kind of get us going. And then I asked Dan on the postgame, special teams has been a success for us this year in a lot of our wins. And tonight it was the opposite. They A 4-minute penalty to Trenholm, an errant stick. Guys bleeding. They score their 2 goals to take the lead, and the Wildcats manage 3 shots. 1 in the first 19 minutes, 2 in the last minute with the goalie pulled. And that's terrible.
Yeah, 3 shots in the third period is bad.
Yeah.
6 dangerous shots the entire game.
Oh.
And then you probably got to think that 2 of those 6 were your goals.
Yeah.
So then you're 4 dangerous shots the entire game. I mean, how do you even manage to do that against a team that is playing their second game in less than 24 hours and a 3-3
with their third goalie,
with a third string goalie?
Yeah. Got to that pads at match.
Yeah. There's so much I could say about this game. It was probably one of their worst performances of the season.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just so our fine listeners know how bad it was, let's go to the armchair GMs of the message board to see what some of these people have to say. Let's see.
Probably not good.
Abysmal. 11 days. I guess when you listen to the show, it'll be 13 days. In 13 days, the Wildcats have gone from being in first place in the Maritimes division to 8 points behind Halifax and 4 ahead of Cape Breton. Yeah. How do you manage to have, again, this is another one, the league's best power play and second best penalty kill on the road, but you're 10th and 16th at home? It's supposed to be the other way around. Yeah. Your best performances are supposed to be on home ice.
There is something about this rink. They have consistently not had good years at home.
I don't understand how they're not capitalizing on where you play or the home ice advantage, because how are they a better team on the road than they are at home? Like, it doesn't make sense. Maybe when you said a month ago, start putting these kids up in hotels and, and then driving the bus to the games. Yeah. It's like,
I was hoping that
make them stay at the friggin' Super 8 in Amherst, so you actually have a little drive to the rink every day. Yeah. You got a half an hour drive on the highway, just so they can get the feeling of a road game. Because the continental breakfast at the Super 8. I mean, yeah, sure, you'll probably end up with salmonella, but I mean.
But if you can play that game that night,
you still have that road vibe. Yeah. You're still taking the bus. Like, I don't get it.
I don't know. And I thought maybe the jerseys would translate. Like the white jerseys at home, they'd bring that whole road mentality. But it'll be something I should dig into for next week, because it has been a consistent, other than the 2020 Memorial Cup year, and I'm calling it that because we were winning. They have not been good at home. And I honestly, it has to do with the fact that some people call it the library. They have to get a vibe in there. And I don't know if right from the puck drop, I was watching the Oilers game on Saturday, and the puck drops and they start banging and everybody starts saying, let's go Oilers. Like, they get the crowd going early. Maybe they take something from the Moncton Magic where they put something on the board where
this is your defensive zone theme song right now, ladies and gentlemen.
I was going to get that there in a minute there. It's the Moncton Magic, where once the puck drops, everybody stands up and gets as loud as they can and cheers as long as they can until the first whistle. Just something to get them energized, because they don't start on time. They don't seem to get up for big games. Over this 4-game losing streak, they have been outshot 152 to 106, so they're being shot on average 38 to 26. That's not a recipe for your goaltenders and or to get wins. The power play is 4 for 11. They're 7 for 18 on the penalty kill. You look at the defensemen. So in this month, Moran has 2 goals, 10 assists for 12 points, 1 and 5 in the streak. Plandowski, no points this month. December 12th was his last point. Grenier, 3 assists, 1 assist in the losing streak. AFG, 2 goals, 4 assists this month, 2 assists in the losing streak. Boutin, a goal and an assist this month. January 17th was his last point on the road trip. Zelensky, an assist this month. He had a point on January 14th. So if you're not contributing offensively and we have a very good puck-moving defense core,
how are you not performing defensively?
what are we doing defensively to eliminate the shots? And what they seem to be doing is just collapse in front of the net and hope that they block something or there's the rebound that they can clear. But it's just it's something fundamentally I believe that has to change in the defensive zone. And I'm not an analytics guy, but I can't believe their goaltending or their goals for over whatever it's called is very good. The goals, I don't even know what the analytics, but it something's got to change.
Yeah, you're getting into a point where it is concerning because we were super confident 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
We were feeling great. We were tweeting about the first place, bragging about it.
First question of the fan question was, how far is this team going to go?
Yeah.
And we said the third round.
Now it's just like, holy
now
crap.
let's get to the playoffs. Well, they're going to make it.
They're going to make the playoffs, but there needs to be some sort of systematic change that for the good, because there's, it's starting to be a trend. They don't know how to start games. No. They're terrible to start games. And I don't think there's any communication. There's no communication. How are you possibly turning the puck over so much? There's no communication.
And it can't be the ice. It can't be the home ice.
No.
Because the other teams are doing it. And I'm sure while people are listening to this, they're getting to the hot seat. Get to the hot seat. Get to the hot seat.
We're over the hot seat.
I'm not going to talk about it because it's not happening. You look at the hot seat from last year. If he wasn't let go when they lost 9 of 10, he sure as shit ain't going to be let go when they lose 4. So...
And you know what? We're allowed to say this about him because clearly he doesn't listen to our podcast. Because when we did the interview with him, so when we did the interview with him after the game on Sunday, he comes at Adam and I talking French, and Adam didn't understand a word he said.
Deer in the headlights.
I was just like, we. But anyways, he basically said, "Who are you, and who do you represent?"
Yeah.
And so clearly, Coach Lacroix doesn't listen to our podcast, which is perfectly fine. You don't have to be a listener, but
we
thanks
thought,
for nothing.
Yeah, which was funny because while we were waiting for him to come talk to us, we thought, oh, he's making us wait because you're fine. We're like, oh, he doesn't like our takes the past 2 years, so he's making us wait for it. But yeah, and I knew that was going to be something that was going to be talked about, or people wanted us to talk about, and it's not going to happen. It's just not. They got to figure it out inside that room. And look, he said something yesterday that this is a very young team, and I was thinking about it on the drive home, and yeah, they lost Hamel, who was a 20-year-old. They lost Barbashev, who was 19. They lost Filion, who was 19, a backup goaltender who was a little bit older. So yeah. They did get younger, but still, the core that knows how to win has been together long enough that something in that room has to change. And I don't know what, or maybe Tessier needs to come on the bench to have that third coach. I'm not saying that the two of them can't do it, but you're looking at the exact same situation as last year, and now... As ridiculous as this is going to sound, and of course, this is all taking place before Bathurst, so they might have broken the streak by the time you hear this. Bathurst and St. John on the weekend become must-win games.
It's
because if you don't win those, then you got to go to Baie-Comeau, Chicoutimi, and Drummondville.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Right now, even if they win those 3 games, they'll be closer to Halifax. But and we can talk about it next week, but I don't see 4 points coming out of that road trip.
No.
Not the way they're playing right now.
No. But hey, they play better on the road, so they'll probably win all 3.
Yeah. And make us... This is the part of the show they'll just listen to and make us seem like idiots.
Yeah. But fortunately, we have a road game in Bathurst on Tuesday, which, mean, it'll be done by the time this is
Yeah.
listened to, and that's one of your games in hand against Halifax. So you've got to win it. But again, the weekend games against St. John and Bathurst, they're probably looking forward to getting on the road. Just don't look ahead to those games. Just focus on the task at hand. Get the wins you need to win. Because like you said, Adam, if they somehow lose these next 3 games, I don't know if I'll be here next week. I might need a vacation.
If they
a
lose
podcast,
the next, yeah.
my first ever podcast vacation.
Yeah. Which is completely fair. I might not be here either. It's my house.
For the love of God.
Yeah.
Please don't.
And what's funny is they go back to 5 games ahead because they go. This one cuts them down to 3. Then Halifax plays on Thursday, which brings them back up to 4. Then Halifax plays on Friday, which brings them up to 5. I'm only saying that because it's funny. I don't know how we got to 5 games in hand. Those games only matter in hand if you win them.
Yep.
But also, we're not catching Halifax the way we're playing. Right now, we got to avoid being caught by Cape Breton, who...
At this rate, Cape Breton's going to win the division.
Yeah. They're 6-1. No, they're not. They're 7-2, 0-1 in their last 10. We're 4-4, 1-1, which basically is our post-trade deadline. And Halifax is 6-1. So... we have aside from Valdor helping us out, we have the longest losing streak in the queue right now.
Hey!
As of Monday. Hey! It might be a W by the time you listen to this, and you'll wonder why we were freaking out. Hey, they won. Why are the guys getting mad? Just remember, we recorded this on Monday. But I believe our guest is ready to go. Are you ready to talk to him?
Let's wheel.
Oh, wrong button. Let's try this again. Where is it? There it is.
Should we play Scotty Two Hotties interest music?
View from the other bench.
All right, as we mentioned in the news segment, we had that special guest with us this week to recap the top prospects game and, just chat prospects because we truly enjoy that. He is the national reporter for the NHL Draft /prospects for The Athletic. We are pleased to be joined for the first time by Scott Wheeler. Scott, I'm assuming you got back to Toronto after a few flight delays. How are you on this final week of January?
Yeah, bit of an adventurous one. We couldn't touch down at the airport there, the island airport there in Toronto, so we actually had to divert back to Ottawa, which I think about an hour earlier we'd flown directly over. So ended up being a little 5-6 hour layover to Ottawa to get the plane refueled and wait for the weather to improve in Toronto so that we could head back to Toronto. But we made it in the end, and I'm home and enjoying a sort of a week off from travel. It was a busy month or so, if you will, there with the World Juniors and the 2 top prospects games in Moncton, and then obviously the USHL one in Plymouth. So I'm happy to sort of be through that middle part of the season. It's a marathon there, so.
Absolutely. That's one airport that I don't think I've ever been to is the Billy Bishop one, but sounds like it's a fun little airport to get into. Last week we had Jerome Berube from Hockey Prospect on to preview, and I'll start kind of where I started with him. When you look at the top prospects game, the casual fan wouldn't know a lot of the names on there other than some cute kids, but they would know Team White's Tija Ginla, who's kind of having a good season there for Kelowna. We didn't know much about him. He was quite the player for Team White, being their player of the game. The shot is what stood out for me. I think that was a quote-unquote pro release, as you would call it. Just what are your thoughts on the way Tej has been this year?
Yeah, sort of a nice story for him. He was obviously a depth player on one of the most stacked and deep WHL teams that we've seen in a long time in Seattle last year. He was actually a healthy scratch in the playoffs on and off, and when he was playing on their 4th line. Not uncommon on a Memorial Cup contending team and a team that ultimately won the WHL championship, especially if you're a 16-year-old who's trying to break into the league. But when you have the cachet that a player like Tija Ginla does, suddenly it's a pretty sort of bumpy road for you. It didn't sort of follow the path, if you will, that he would have liked. Then he gets traded at the start of this year from Seattle. Now that they're sort of in a full-on rebuild, he gets traded from Seattle to Kelowna. He gets to play with Andrew Cristall, who's obviously a second-round pick of the Washington Capitals and one of the most offensively gifted, if you will, players in the WHL, and things really started to click for him. No surprise. Very talented player, great skater, attacks at you on edges, can take you on edges. Really sort of dynamic angle type of player in the offensive zone, if you will. Good hands. The release that you talked about sort of really pops off of his blade. It's actually funny. I talked to him a little bit about it, and it's kind of a traditional snapshot. We don't really see that in today's NHL. There's a lot of curl and drag. Everybody's trying to pattern after Austin Matthews and Connor Bedard now, and he just leans into it. There's not a lot of curling it into his feet, but he just leans into it, leverages his stick, and just sort of lets it go, a la Jerome again, and Joe Sakic, and those sort of vintage releases of the 90s and early 2000s that we used to see once composite sticks were introduced. So bit of a throwback player. He also sort of plays hard. He's not a sort of physical power forward type like his dad. He's not going to drop the gloves. But he'll sort of fight for pucks out there and get after it on the forecheck, and then he's got some real skill in skating and obviously the shot on top of it. So he now looks like a bona fide sort of first-round talent, and maybe even a front half of the first-round guy. He's not going to be a top 10 pick in this draft, but I think once you get outside the true cream of the crop in this group, once you get outside the top 12 or 13 picks in this year's draft, he's going to start to enter the conversation for a lot of teams. And I expect that if he's not picked in the teams, that we'll see him selected in the 20s.
Yeah, so when you get into Moncton, you've got a pretty good idea of most of these players. Were there any players that you were looking forward to watching just based, I guess, on limited viewings?
Oh, good question. Not necessarily based on limited viewings, but there were a couple of players that we wanted to see in this environment. The first being Henry Muse. Henry has been a top player for Hockey Canada at 2 different international events now, both the Hlinka Gretzky Cup and the U17s. He looked like a top player in the OHL last year as a 16-year-old defenseman who put up 30-something points. This year was a really, really sort of tougher start to his season. He's been much better of late, but had a tough go to his season for a projected first-round pick. The decision-making wasn't tightened up. He got exposed one-on-one defensively a bunch of times. And scouts, I think, as a result, sort of started to question just the way that he thought and processed the game, I think. And so this was an opportunity for him outside of the Ottawa 67s, outside of the OHL, to sort of look like a top player in a big game and sort of against other top competition in this draft, and sort of re-solidify himself as a sort of surefire first rounder in this group. And then I thought he actually had a couple of really tough shifts early in the game. He settled in nicely. He had some good moments late when they had the net empty and they were pushing to tie it. He was out there activating off the point, making things happen. They didn't quite break through and sort of create the goal that they were looking for, but I thought he was involved offensively. I thought he started to settle down. He actually performed quite well in the on-ice testing the day before the game, which I think was positive for him. So again, a bit of a mixed bag, which leaves scouts wondering, okay, is Henry Muse is that just what he is? Is he going to have some highs and lows, and are we comfortable taking him in the first round as a result? So he was probably the one that I and many others were sort of most interested to see in that setting. And then the other one, I mean, he's a big name, so hardly under the radar guy here, but Zane Parekh, just seeing him outside of Saginaw. Saginaw is such a unique system. They play so loose. They really let their players play on offense and make things happen creatively. There have often been questions about their players as a result. Cole Perfetti went through it. Pavel Mintyukov went through it. He's now going through it in terms of how much of it is Saginaw and how loose they play. Is he ever going to be able to button up defensively? I think we're now seeing that those questions are being answered by Pavel Mintyukov in the NHL with the Anaheim Ducks this season. I have a belief that Zane Parekh will do the same thing when he arrives in the NHL. But ultimately, Zane, for a defenseman, is never actually going to be a great defender, natural defender. He's not physical. He's not a super competitive kid in board battles and box outs and all of that. Defends mostly with his feet and his stick. There are a lot of players, very good players in the NHL who get by that way, but his offense is going to have to be so dynamic that it sort of overrides some of the defensive deficiencies, and I think ultimately it will be. He's clearly one of the most talented in 11 years of scouting these kids, clearly one of the most talented defensemen I've ever watched at this age. So there's a special quality there, even if the D isn't always going to be high end. So he's an interesting one. I thought in the game, Zane was good, not great. Got to beat on a 3-on-1 that went off of his skate and kicked out to Liam Greentree, but I actually thought he defended that 3-on-1 about perfectly. Cut off the initial pass, which was intended for Jet Luchenko, and just by virtue of cutting off that pass, it actually redirected out to Greentree. So didn't really have much of a chance there. But otherwise, I thought he was good. He's never, as I mentioned, never going to be a super hard-nosed, hard to play against defenseman. So I think teams saw a little bit of that. And if you're not comfortable taking that type of player because he's not going to play that type of style, then so be it. But I think ultimately with saying you're going to sort of bet, someone's going to bet on the offense near the very top of the draft. I don't know whether that's top 10 or top 15, but he's going to be one of the first players picked. And I expect at the NHL level is going to be an extremely dynamic offensive defenseman.
So I think it was during the first intermission, me and Jamie Tozer from Station Nation were talking about the game, and it didn't have the oomph in it because we didn't have the Macklin Celebrinis and the Cole Isermans and whatnot. And literally right after the game, Jeff Merrick has that tweet that there's looking to be a proposed CHL versus NCAA game that'll take over for the Prospects game. So I want to bring it back a little closer to Moncton as your number 3 player on your list, Cole Iserman. Moncton took him in the U.S. draft, and both Jeremy and I are hoping he shows up next year and what could be an all-in year for us. But I guess just what did the fans kind of miss not seeing a Macklin Celebrini and your number 3 player and Wildcat U.S. draft player in Cole Iserman?
Yeah, I mean, not just that, but obviously Caden Lindstrom is dealing with a hand injury and sidelined as well. So there's that piece of it. Caden's going to be a top 10 pick in this draft and had to bow out due to injury. So, just a number of sort of high-end guys that weren't available. Obviously, Celebrini and Iserman were never going to be a part of this game. That will change moving forward. Iserman's an interesting one. I wouldn't get too excited about him potentially coming to play in the CHL at any point ever in his career.
You're killing us, Scotty. You're killing us. You're on a Wildcast podcast. Give us some hope.
Yeah. No, he's going to go off to BU and he's going to light it up, and he might even be 1 and done or 2 and done at BU, and then he's going to be playing in the NHL. But no, I mean, it's certainly this year's group was defined by the defensemen. That was always going to be the case. Sam Dickinson, Carter Yakimchuk, Perek, who I touched on. Those were sort of the big names, if you will. Obviously, at forward, you had Berkeley Catton. They would have liked to have had Caden Lindstrom involved. That would have given the game a little bit more juice. It's a good but not great draft class. Certainly, it pales in comparisons to last year, and not just because of Connor Bedard's presence last year, but you go down the list, especially that W8, that special 2005 age group out of the WHL, whether it was Braden Yeager, Zach Benson, Nate Danielson. It was a really, really impressive group. Samuel Hanzik, obviously, he was actually injured. He had a sort of lower body injury, broken leg ahead of last year's event, so wasn't able to participate like he would have hoped to. But last year's event had a little bit more flair in terms of the high-end talent. And yet I thought this year's game was actually a more competitive game. The 4 goaltenders participating in this year's game were certainly a cut above the 4 goaltenders participating in last year's game, and that showed in their play on the ice, but also in the scoreline. So lots of good in this year's game, even if it didn't have the Bedard type. And I'm looking forward to the new format that you hinted at. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, it will mean that instead of there being 40 players from the U.S. and 40 players from Canada that get to participate in each of their individual games, it's going to really narrow it down to only the true top prospects, which is a bit of a bummer, if I'm being honest, just because there are always players who stand out who wouldn't be in that group of 20. And it's always a nice showing for them. Even this year, player of the game, Raul Boyard. If it was a 20-player game against 20 players from the U.S., he wouldn't have been able to participate. There are similar standouts from this year's Chipotle All-American game south of the border, kids who, had it been a 20 versus 20, one team versus one team matchup, suddenly you cut the player pool in half that's participating in the game. And there are kids in the projected go into the 3rd, 4th round rather than the 1st and 2nd round who don't get to show themselves. So that is a little disappointing, but on the flip side, it's going to be to have a series and to pit them head to head and to sort of drum up some of those competitive juices. It's going to be a much more competitive game. It's going to be a much higher quality game. There's going to be something on the line. I think the players are actually going to play for something not just in terms of individual points and showing nice in front of scouts, but in terms of actually playing to win those games, which I'm not sure is always the case at the CHL Top Prospects game. I think there's a little bit of me that happens at the CHL game and at the All-American game, where they're playing all of their buddies, and it's just an opportunity to go out there and make plays and have fun. So this will tighten up the game. It'll be a more physical contest, I imagine, a more competitive contest. And ultimately, I think you'll see the best rise to the top. So I am very much looking forward to seeing what next year's 2-game series looks like. I would guess that one of the games is just going to be played in Plymouth, where they typically play the All-American game and where the National Development Program is played out of. And then the Canadian game will probably be some kind of rotation. Because next year was due to be the CHL Top Prospects game on the current rotation through the 3 leagues was due to be in the OHL. I would guess that it's an OHL host city for the Canada leg of the new series that they're planning for next year. As far as destinations go, I think you can probably look at some of the teams that have top 2025 prospects. There's 2 kids in Erie, in Matthew Schaefer in particular, and obviously Jordan Spence as well, who are legit prospects for next year's draft. Michael Misa obviously is a top prospect in Saginaw in terms of OHL. Saginaw has just been awarded the Memorial Cup, so I don't think they're likely to get the first dibs at hosting next year's game. But those are sort of the top OHL prospects. I'm not sure they'll want it in Erie, if I'm being frank. Right. And I know they've recently denied hosting the Memorial Cup in places like Ottawa and places like Kingston. So you could maybe see one of the runners-up that lost out on the Memorial Cup might get a nugget from the CHL to have their city be the host for next year's game. But it's going to be a great showcase for whatever city gets it in Ontario, which would be my guess. And then certainly if you're able to make the drive or the flight out to the Detroit area and jog over to Plymouth, it should be a lot of fun.
I feel like a team that could use that kind of good publicity would be the Steelheads. I think they got a couple players. They got one from Sarnia and one from Peterborough, I think, that are drafted. Their names are escaping.
Porter Martone and their goaltender Dejavanuary are both legit high-end prospects for next year's draft. Unfortunately, Mississauga has never, ever, ever been a draw in the OHL. Yeah. There's lots of talk these days about Mississauga potentially relocating due to financial issues. Yeah. It just hasn't worked at that rink. It's really hard to drive to. There's no public transit out to the rink, even though it's in Mississauga. So my guess is they're going to want this game to be packed for its first ever game, and that wouldn't likely happen in Mississauga. So it is possible, though. Certainly Martone and Ivankovic are legit prospects for next year's draft. And
if they're moving to Brampton, and I think just put their name on the logo, maybe that's your first event. But now you had a tweet following up on that we could see some Russian and Belarusians potentially coming back to the CHL. I just want to get do you have any more info on that? We talked about a little bit on our show about how it's kind of time to have the best players representing in the CHL, but also maybe down the line with the World Juniors. But any more info that you have on that kind of scenario that you tweeted out I think a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, a very sort of fluid thing. Certainly nothing set in stone, but there have been discussions about lifting the CHL import draft ban on Russian and Belarusian players. I know certainly agents have pushed hard for it. There is a lineup of kids in Russia and in Belarus who want to come over here and play in the CHL. There are recent success stories in the USHL, so there's a bit of a war that is being lost here, if you will, by in terms of on the ice by the CHL by allowing these players to go south of the border and play. Artem Levshunov is going to be a potential second or third overall pick in this year's draft. His preference was to play in the CHL, but he didn't have that option. He's a kid from Belarus who went over and played in the USHL in Green Bay last year and is now a star at Michigan State University in the NCAA. He was never planning to go the NCAA route. Matt Vigridin of the Muskegon Lumberjacks is another player. He's a Russian, not a Belarusian, who has been a star for Muskegon in the USHL this season. He's now headed to Michigan. I know his preference also was to come over originally and to play in the CHL. So there are players that are eager to get back into the CHL. There are agents that would rather their clients be in the CHL than in the USHL in terms of development and in terms of getting recognized by NHL scouts. But ultimately, it's a very layered thing as well. It's not as simple as the CHL deciding to lift the ban. Mm-hmm. They also need to make sure that these kids can get their visas approved. Adar Sanayev, for example, a player who was drafted by the Calgary Flames in last year's draft, had major visa issues, both in Canada and now getting into college in the States. He was originally committed to Harvard and had to recommit to UMass because Harvard wasn't going to accept him due to being Russian and because he was having visa issues. So there's a Canadian government aspect to lifting the ban as well, where the CHL is going to need assurances from the Canadian government that if they lift the ban, that the players are going to get visas and they're going to be able to come over here and play. There's no guarantee that the Canadian government wants these kids coming over here to play. In many cases, believe it or not, these kids come from very wealthy Russian families. In many cases, their parents are involved in the Russian government. So there's all sorts of layers to sort of getting Russian players back over here. And it's a very complicated issue, obviously, with the geopolitics of it all. So it's being discussed. It's something that I think the CHL isn't necessarily opposed to changing at this point. It's just a matter of, okay, what does that look like? And is it practical? And what are the logistics in terms of actually getting players back over here and getting players reintegrated and visas and translators and all of that? They've got to open up those doors again. So we'll see what happens. But I would not be shocked if for ahead of the import draft in the spring, if there's some sort of announcement about a change.
So I wonder if, sorry, before you go, Jeremy, I wonder if there'd be a situation with like a transfer portal, or if you wanted to take one of those kids that's playing in the UCHL, if they open that up, or if it would strictly be you have to draft a player from across the ocean.
I think the most likely outcome is that there's no sort of USHL forgiveness. There are already pretty strict rules in place about players who commit to college and play in the USHL and not being able to re-enter into the CHL. There have only ever been rare exceptions to that. Obviously, Matthew Savoy went down and played in the USHL during the pandemic. That was largely because the WHL wasn't operating. Cole Sillinger did the same thing, played a year in the USHL because the WHL wasn't operating during the pandemic. He would have been he ended up going right to surprise some people and went right to Columbus in the NHL after that. But he would have technically been eligible to return to Medicine Hat, who owned his rights and play in Medicine Hat. So there are layers to it. Obviously, a few players in recent years. Chaz Lucius recently decommitted from college after playing a year at the University of Minnesota and went and played for the Portland Winterhawks. Kiefer Bellows did the same thing. So there are rules that allow college players to return, but often in cases, if you've chosen the USHL, it becomes very difficult for you to go either from the USHL to the CHL or from the CHL to the USHL. So my guess is that door won't be open for Russian players that are already in the USHL, and that it would just be players who are currently playing in Russia that then become, and Belarusia, or Belarus, I should say, who are then allowed to sort of participate in the draft again.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and just to end the end things, I know I want you to get back to your night there. I guess just your overall thoughts on the NHL draft and the idea of going to more of a decentralized model here in the coming years.
I mean, for selfish reasons, I don't love it. But even from an NHL perspective, and by selfish reasons, I mean it's a great event. It's a great opportunity for people like me in the media, for NHL teams. Everybody, it's the only time of the year where everybody in the hockey world is all in one place. It's a tremendous opportunity for sourcing and building relationships with people from around the league, for gathering info, all of that. I think as a result, it's good for the league because then it produces good reporting. It produces trades on the floor that you wouldn't see happening over the phone. It produces good television. It's the only time of the year that we get to see very private people, which the majority of general managers are. It's the only time we get to see Lou Lamoriello and Steve Yzerman actually doing work and actually sort of, you get to see how the sausage is made, if you will. So that part of it from a fan perspective, I think is also great. The television sort of viewing experience, I think they actually had a really good thing going. I think they do their drafts, or they have done traditionally their drafts in the NHL much better than most of the other professional leagues in North America. The centralized draft that the MLB does, for example, is a complete bore. It's not a TV event. Nobody tunes in. Their numbers are terrible. That's never been the case for the NHL. So right. Disappointing that way. Especially when the criteria given was strictly about scheduling. The schedule is something that the NHL has virtually full control over. I know that there are certain times when they like to start the season and finish the season, but if it was a matter of creating 2 or 3 more days between the draft and between free agency, they could have made amendments to the CBA to move free agency from July 1st to July 3rd, for example, or to move the draft from June 29th to June 26th, for example. They could have made that happen. They could have built that into the schedule and made an adjustment that way to give NHL teams the opportunity to get home. I know there was a lot of frustration getting out in Nashville last year, and flight issues and bad weather and all of that messed with people's ability to plan for free agency, and there was frustration from NHL clubs. I do think they may live to regret this decision, though. I also think they're going to see how it looks in the Sphere in Vegas, and it's going to be a huge success, a huge bang to go off on, and might make them second guess their decision. So we'll see what the decentralized draft looks like, but my guess is that it's going to be a much slower product on TV. We saw that during the pandemic draft when they hosted it out of their studios, the Secaucus studios for the NHL Network, just how brutally slow it was waiting for people to phone in their picks. Moves very quickly on draft day. They had it down to a science on draft day. So all of those are wrinkles that they're going to have to figure out. I think it could be pretty ugly for the first couple of years as they figure out what works and what doesn't, at least in terms of the TV product of it. But we'll see what it looks like. I'm very excited for Vegas. I think Vegas will be great. But after that, who knows?
Yeah, well, I mean, leave it to Gary Bettman to keep making mistakes with the league that he's trying to grow in the United States. But does that mean you're going to be in Vegas?
I will be in Vegas. Yep, the hotel's booked. The flights are booked. I'm staying at the Paris Casino. First time in Vegas. It's actually one of, I think I've done 25 or 26 of the 32 NHL markets now, and it's one of the sort of 6 or 7 that I haven't hit. So looking forward to getting there, and I know my colleagues will take care of me because there's a lot of people in the last few years since expansion who've actually been a lot of journalists who've been there quite a lot. So I'm looking forward to the Vegas experience.
My only all I have to say is don't get sucked into the timeshare scam.
Yeah.
Yeah, and stay away from Circus. But other than that, you'll be fine in Vegas. Scott, we really appreciate you taking the time. It went a little longer than we had asked for, and we really appreciate you graciously taking the time. Just for our listeners, where can they find your articles as we get closer to the NHL draft for their NHL teams that they focus on?
Yeah, at Scott C. Wheeler on Twitter, or X as it's called now. And there's another thing that Gary Bettman feels like Gary Bettman screwed that up, but it wasn't Gary Bettman. But we won't get into that. At Scott C. Wheeler on Twitter or X, and just at The Athletic. That's where all the work is. And I'm sure you'll be hearing about a certain Caleb Desnoyers this time next year.
All right, we got you penciled in for this time next year. Again, really appreciate taking the time, Scott. Have a good night.
Cheers.
That's one of those interviews that just feels like we become more legitimate when we get someone from The Athletic. And again, that's one of the opportunities we get from being at that prospect game. But a lot of good info. I think I'm kind of the way he described the CHL NCAA thing. I kind of am excited for that 2-game tournament or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, fingers crossed for Barry, because free room and board would be the one positive.
We'll go if you put it in Barry. We'll go.
I'll be there.
Yeah, we'll go. We'll go follow Caleb.
Yeah, and Erie. Nope.
Yeah, no, not Erie.
Saginaw.
We'll do Kingston.
Nope.
That's close to my family. Guelph. We'll do Guelph.
I could probably do Guelph. Peterborough.
Yeah. Somewhere Kitchener. That's close to Scott, and London doesn't need it. They get enough as it is. But yeah, no, it's I didn't think it would be in the OHL. I didn't know if they rotated it like the Memorial Cup is rotated. So, but yeah, that was a really good interview. Could have talked to that guy for another 20 minutes, another hour or so. So, are you ready for
everyone's favorite part of the show?
Let's do it. Let's see if I can find the soundboard for it. Here we go.
Eric Murray, Realtor. Buy your house from him. Stick Tap of the Week.
Yes. So as Adam and I have mentioned multiple times on this episode, we were in attendance for the CHL NHL Kubota top prospects game as media. And I thought I'd give this little stick tap to Chris Seguin, who is the media man, individual, media person. Coordinator for the Canadian Hockey League, who graciously accepted our applications, which is weird because when we met him at the rink, he found out that we were the clowns. So thank you for still approving our applications, despite knowing that we are clowns. This would also be a good time for me to play my circus music again, but I'll save that for...
Hopefully not next week.
Hopefully next... Yeah, exactly. I don't want to be playing the clown music after 3 games against games you should win. Go Cats! Thank you, Chris.
The Stick Tap of the Week, sponsored by Eric Murray Real Estate with the RE/MAX Avante team. If you're looking to buy or sell a home in the Greater Moncton or surrounding area, make sure to check him out on social media or give him a call at 506-863-8802.
Guy pays to have his ad read, and you guys are talking over it.
Buy a lot from him.
Yeah, you can. Which, speaking of, you should give him a call. You're in the house market?
Oh, I am in the house market. If you want to see a nice picture of Eric, you got to go for a skate at the Irishtown Community Center.
Oh, yeah?
It's got a nice big poster of his face.
Oh, what a beauty. That brings us to the Wildcast of the Week, presented by Rosemary Lynn's Massage and Spa. Right now until February 7th, they got a flash sale. Get a Shellac manicure for $35, a Shellac pedicure for $35, and a set of gel acrylic nails. Not here, but
flash sale.
I was like, that's not what this place is. That's not what this place is. Set of gel or acrylic nails for $45 while they get the loyalty card. When you book 9 spa services, you get 1 free. To take advantage of it, call to book 506-830-1224 or book with them in person at 1224 Mountain Road. The captain was doing his best to get us some wins, get us out of this doldrum, if you will, with 3 goals in the past 2 games, which kept his streak 3 games intact. He's now got 6 goals in the past 4 games. He's doing his best carrying this group. Lost a couple of his line mates for a few games, but he's doing his job. So the Wildcat of the Week is your captain, number 20, Johan Loshing. That'll do it. That will do it. I know we talked about housing. How'd that go? Your first venture into the nerves of house shopping.
I discovered that the market is still... It's very much... how am I going to say this? Let's just see. I placed an offer on a house.
Yep.
That we really liked, and we saw the potential.
Yep.
And with that potential, we decided to offer $5,000 over asking.
Wow.
Let's go. Let's get it. Nope. It sold for $40,000 over asking.
Yeah, that's...
So we are still...
in the hunt. So if you want a private sale, let's hit us up on the DMs. If you have a house you want to sell, let Jeremy know. But you are still kind of looking, or are you taking a little bit of a...
No, we're going to... I mean...
How many houses have you seen? Because honest to God, and you could probably ask Eric, I think we went to about 70 houses.
We've been to 3
2 years
so
that
far.
we did this.
Yeah, we went to 3 so far.
Yeah. A little bit left to go.
Yeah.
All right. Once again, we want to thank Scott Wheeler of The Athletic for joining us on the show. As well, the Wildcats are at home this weekend. Saturday versus Bathurst, Sunday versus St. John. Get your tickets now because they hit the road for 4 after that. For Jeremy, I'm Adam. Depending how the week goes, we'll see you next week. If they get some W's, if they don't get some W's,
podcast vacation.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Wildcast podcast. Follow us on social media at Moncton Wildcast.